How do you do? This is Trixie, the Golden Witch, ranting, raving Ota Queen and Mother of Annie Tube, and I'm here to talk about My Neighbor Totoro with my man, producer, legendary producer of hip hop, Cranberry Dave.
Yeah, of hip hop. That's important. I'm good right now. Thank you. I'm legendary hip hop producer of the legendary in its own right group Sucker Punch. Follow us on Spotify for a new single every single week.
Fuck yes.
And follow my Spotify, Cranberry Dave, for new instrumentals every week, either from Sucker Punch or something I just want to post on the beat feed, you know? So
I'm excited about that. So motherfuckers can go out there and chop and screw that shit and try to see if they can compete bar for bar on the beats that you provide to the Sucker Punch elite. You know what I mean?
that's the idea.
So,
Sure do.
My Neighbor Totoro, what made you choose this as the anime to talk about?
It's just so cute. It's just something about it is probably the perfect Ghibli.
When you say that Totoro is the perfect Ghibli film, like, what are you looking for in a Ghibli film that it delivers?
Beauty, wonder, nostalgia, the sense of, I don't know, comfort but not satisfaction.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Because it's a movie that you can really settle in with. The first time I ever did half a tab of acid, I watched this movie and I gooed into it. I just kind of was like so taken in by the pleasantness of the experience of the early film. And it took me a while to really register that, like, the start of this movie is like a couple of young girls with their dad moving into a house out in the middle of the countryside. And it's this big old house that is drawn so gorgeously that it took me a while to even really process it. The point of the scene is that it's run down. That, like, it's not a better place to live than what they had before. It's kind of scary, it's mysterious, it's weird, and, like, from an adult perspective, like, I was thinking about much more of, like, oh my god, like, that kid's gonna fall through the floorboards. Like, this is actually scary in a way that when I wasn't thinking about it from that perspective, I'm just focused on how beautifully drawn it all is, that it feels like, well, of course I'd want to be at this place. Of course I'd love to explore this house and see all this stuff and get into this, like, mysterious reality, even though, like, when I actually think about being the person who owns that house, I'm, like, way more concerned, you know?
Yeah. That's one of the things that the music accomplishes really well, is getting the divide in audience, I guess, between children and adults. Because the music of My Neighbor Totoro and all the Studio Ghibli films was composed by a guy named Joe Hisaishi. Amazing, legendary composer. But his method is actually pretty simple. One of the things that he does is harmonic instability. So we're very used to a select number of chords being used in a select number of ways, right? And so when, say he has a C chord, he might not use the third of the C chord, because it's a 3-note chord. He might not use the third and instead use a bunch of different intervals, so you get the idea of a C chord without the substance, without what sells it as anything concrete. And so in scenes where there's a lot of tension, this is expressed in his music when
there's, like, a lack of resolution in, like, the phrasing, it sounds like, or
that, and there's never a actual credible threat. There's only empty suspense. There's only monsters under the closet.
Right.
And so as a kid, you're watching this movie and thinking, oh, monsters under the closet. Right. But you're watching as an adult and you're thinking, oh, I remember monsters under the closet. I'm just concerned about this sink falling through the floor.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I'm not even like afraid of the monsters and stuff, especially like if you've already seen the film, you're coming back to it, then you also realize like that none of this stuff is threatening, but you do see like the broader emotional threat of like where the kids actually are at this moment, because as the movie goes along, you come to realize the reason that they are living out in the countryside is that their mom is sick, and so she's had to be relocated to a hospital out in the middle of like a place with cleaner air. But like she doesn't live at home, she still lives in the hospital, so like their mom's just kind of not around, and they're in like this weird sort of dangerous place where dad can't really pay attention because he still has to work and keep the whole machine running, and he's like a writer who's just sort of at his desk. And there's a scene where like his daughter is playing with like a bucket out in the backyard, and he's like writing at the desk, and she has like I think a whole interaction with like one of these mythical creatures that like if he had turned his head for 1 second he would have just like noticed this happening. But like he has to be doing his work, so like even though he is like a very attentive father, a very good father, caring and going as far as he possibly could for his wife and kids, nonetheless there's still tons of danger just in the fact that like mom's not there to look after them for the other half of the time, and like the world is full of weird mysterious things. Luckily in this case they're good.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say really quick on your point just now about the father being that oblivious.
Yeah.
It's just such a refreshing trope to me, because it really, like, obviously there's a part of my like critical primal stupid brain that always thinks when I see some kind of absurd suspense like a stealth scene that, oh, this could never happen, this is just foolish, why am I watching this?
Right.
But then I remember, oh, when I was a kid, this is kind of what it felt like how much effort I had to put into getting something past my parents, or worse, like in this, the danger of my parents are just not seeing it.
Right,
and
exactly.
Like getting across that terror it's great.
And then we're describing this like it's a horror movie almost. It is a monster movie at the end of the day. Like it's a cute children's film about a mom that's dying and her daughter's being sad about it. Like it's not like it's uplifting, but it's not a happy movie, I guess.
I mean, just given the context, a way darker story could be told in like out of the gate.
I think it's the kind of thing also that like, again, rewatching it, the experience is tainted even darker because that like the mom's in the hospital and that's why they're out here, and like there's just lots of nuance in the way that the characters act that again peels back the layers of looking at it as like, oh, it's just cute kids having a cute fun time, and then like if you're really paying attention to the kids, they're not necessarily having a fun time all the time. The younger daughter is like kind of a pissed off crybaby sometimes, and the older one's like really trying to manage the fact that like she's kind of in charge of this kid and who won't listen to her,
right?
So like there is a sense of like desperation behind the whole thing. And the music, like you said, it's got like this dark tinge to it, but it's also very nostalgic. And I think it's crazy how much the nostalgia bleeds through even to like a Western audience, because I think a lot of the music calls back to more like classical Japanese melodies. Just from like having seen so much anime that uses music that's deliberately harkening back to classical Japanese melodies and stuff like the Toho games. Like there's lots of music in those that sound kind of like the melodies in My Neighbor Totoro. So I definitely think there's an element of like just a different musical theory that has been followed in the East versus the West. That might be some of why like it seems really unexpected, even though it also feels nostalgic and like obvious. Like it's just like Japanese music, I think, has just been trying to get a different emotional effect than Western music has for the most part. Western music tends to be like grandiose emotion, and like a lot of Eastern music is like meditative and like reflective,
Yeah.
I think that's where this soundtrack hangs. And Man, there are a lot of lo-fi hip-hop beats that were crafted out of this fucking soundtrack.
That's part of the interest of Ghibli music for me, just because I spent a lot of my like late high school, early college just listening to hundreds of hours of lo-fi beats while I studied, as God intended.
You and at least like 50,000 other
50 billion
people,
others.
50 billion
those,
other people.
The streams recently got shut down over copyright concerns.
Oh, no.
Like someone posted a fake copyright claim against the channel,
I can't
and
believe
so
it took that long.
the stream stopped, and it was like 20,000 or 30,000 hours,
Fuck.
and it had half a billion views or something crazy like that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, lo-fi hip-hop was definitely the zeitgeist for like the last 5 years. Like,
Yeah.
that was where I think like hip-hop beyond like the commercial stuff that has stayed successful for like, you know, the stuff that plays in clubs or plays on the radio, like the fact that now people are like more endeared even to old school stuff and more underground stuff. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that like everybody's now spent fucking hundreds of hours listening to lo-fi hip-hop beats to study and relax to.
Yeah.
It gets like referenced in mainstream TV shows and shit. Like,
I mean, it gets used in mainstream
Yeah,
TV shows and
that
stuff.
too.
Like, it's just fucking everywhere now. And at least in the early stages, Ghibli was all over that. So I just, before I even like had watched My Neighbor Totoro, I just heard all of the songs 1,000 times, and they were baked into me.
That's incredible. I'm sure if Ghibli knew about all that, they would not be happy. Like, they would have shut those streams down ages ago if they had found out that like every My Neighbor Totoro song was being like, exploited that way.
I think a third of Spotify would just be down if all of the lo-fi covers were exposed.
Let's not tell them anymore. We're blowing the cover.
Oh,
we gotta
shit.
shut it down. Dave,
Yeah.
what's your favorite scene that you can remember from My Neighbor Totoro?
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't even care about any of the creatures. I couldn't care less. I just love the landscape. I just,
Okay.
like, the scene of them driving into... I know it's, like, a cop-out or whatever, but the scene of them driving into the place is just jaw-dropping.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it is jaw-dropping. Like, each Ghibli movie kind of has a little bit of a different focus on, like, what it's trying to accomplish with its background art and with, like, the design work. And this one really is just trying to be, like, as true to the Japanese countryside as possible while capturing as much of its beauty as possible. Like, it's extremely realistic, borderline photorealistic in the backgrounds, but like obviously they like didn't focus on anything ugly or bad. Like, they didn't put fucking litter in the,
Yeah.
the trees or anything. Like, it's a glamorized version of what like Miyazaki thinks that things should look like based on, like, you know, his experience of the best parts of the Japanese landscape, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, the backgrounds are goddamn gorgeous. You are a very aesthetically driven person.
Certainly.
I've noticed. You've done some visual designs. You've done all the visual work for the Sucker Punch music videos and for the lyric videos, all the ones that have the
little waveforms. Yeah.
I really appreciate all the work you do over there. So I'm glad that
Thank you.
movies like this have had some influence on you and shaped your visual sense.
Speaking of which, this one is like definitely that.
Okay.
This is, I believe the word is komorebi. It's the Japanese word for the visual of light coming through leaves.
Okay.
And I heard that in some context, and I thought it was really cool when I made a song out of it.
It looks like gold, not unlike the song
It
that
certainly
you
does.
produced and made a visualizer for that comes first in the playlist of all the Sucker Punch songs,
Oh, does it?
which is linked down below.
Nice.
What's your favorite Sucker Punch beat you've made?
That's a really tricky.
Of the ones that have come out.
Yeah,
Not-
yeah.
not, you know, there's lots and
Oh,
lots of Sucker
well now
Punch
it's
beats.
electric type.
Okay.
Because that
Ukulele?
yeah, that sample is from Earthbound, the old RPG that you might know from Smash Brothers, if everyone's played that.
Yeah.
But there's a character in that called the Jolly Flying Man, and he's a guy who helps you when you incept yourself into your own dream state in this game. There's a little bird man who helps you like beat up enemies, because all of them are really strong and wacky.
Yeah.
And so he has whenever you're with him, he has like a discrete musical theme. And it's based off of another just totally unrelated song that was made before the character even existed, called Flying Man, by some artist named Louis Philippe. It was made as there was a companion album to this old NES game, or not even Super Famicom game, Mother, the prequel to Earthbound.
Yeah.
Oh, just a real life album that was recorded in a real studio to go with this game.
Okay.
And one of the songs on that Flying Man was like repurposed into this little like 16-bit loop.
That was then used in the sequel.
Yes.
So,
and then used now for this
I know
banger.
that like Earthbound was the big influence on Homestuck and on what's the game? Undertale.
Yeah.
And those were big influences on you as a musical creator, right?
Certainly.
Could you tell me something about that?
Well, when I was a young boy, full of ambition and hope, I wanted to, as many such people like me wanted to, create video games.
Yeah.
And so I started just coming up with like story ideas while I was supposed to be like doing schoolwork. And eventually I just wrote like an entire like soundtrack to a game that doesn't exist. And
as you do,
I wrote like an embarrassingly gushy email to Toby Fox about how I really like him and how he's influenced me for so many years and he's great and I want to be like him.
Yeah.
And I attached him on my music, and the ones that he looked at, he said were pretty good.
That's pretty high praise, considering that guy is like one of the most influential modern game music.
Yeah, I didn't know that he was
producers.
gonna start doing the Pokemon music. Like he's done all of the ones that are in the trailers.
That's fucking
crazy.
Wild. I mean, they basically, it's like the company with the most money identified the guy with the best music and said, yeah, that's the guy. Like, nobody else is gonna have that guy, obviously. But we did that with you when we found you. We were like,
hell yeah.
I'm not letting anyone else get their hands on a Cranberry Dave. This has to be the Sucker Punch producer. People don't even realize, like, you do samples like that, but you also produce a lot of original, like, instrument work for the music. Like, you play guitar, you play drums, you play keyboard.
Yeah.
You did the guitar riffs on Worst Trait, which from our album Hurricane Season, which is one of my favorite guitar riffs that has ever existed in a rap metal song. And when I found out you just like played that, I was like, how did you just come up with that?
That's a very high compliment, because I happen to be a big connoisseur of trap metal.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't usually shine through in the stuff that we make in Sucker Punch quite yet, but
right. Oh, don't worry.
we got some stuff in
tracks
the
in
works.
Yeah. And I mean, you just can do so many styles. It's you have a broad range of influences. I know a lot of Guilty Gear comes through in the guitar work. What would you say is like some of your biggest influences that maybe aren't as obvious?
The tricky ones to pin down is like I don't know. I'm a really big fan of Danny Brown.
Okay.
And his just scary shit, you know?
Yeah. His wild ass beat selection.
His wild, like, and just sound design choices that I'm sure he had some part in, at least.
Right, yeah.
Because, I mean, that's like, especially the vocal stuff that he does.
Yeah.
If I ever make an album with as good of like vocal effects as like Atrocity Exhibition, I think I can hang my hat on that.
I could hear him in my head, just I'm sweating like I'm in a rave, like with that echoey effect on it. Yeah, it does sound really good. Sweat. All right, tell us where to find all your shit.
Well, there's lots of places now. I've grown the amount of places that you can find me. For example, I now have youtube.com/cranberrydave, except no imposters in brown. I think you wore brown in one of the videos. SoundCloud.com/cranberrydave. That's where you can find, I think, the most of my beats at this time. That's just kind of my sketch pad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of those beats even are now Sucker Punch songs. So you can check those out there. Other than that, Instagram, right, Instagram.com, cranberry.dave. Yeah, cranberry.dave.
You also run the Sucker Punch accounts.
Yes.
On Twitter, what's that?
At Sucker Punch Rap.
Perfect. So, and we're on Spotify. Catch us there. If you search Sucker Punch and the name of any song on YouTube, you'll either get the proper Cranberry Dave visualizer version or the like weird Spotify extra post version that comes up too. You can find us all over the place. I've been Trixie the Golden Witch. You can find the links to where you can support me in the description. $5 or more. I'll rant about whatever you want on Patreon. Just DM me the rant request and I'll do it in a big stream at the end of the month. Thanks again for watching, and never forget, Sucker Punch forever.
Peace.
Well, I gotta tie my shoe.
Be quick about it.
Sorry that took so long.